And we will take you to Adelaide Oval for those coaches' press conference
AFL's worst
shortly.
nightmare. It really is. On the eve of what has been one of the great finishes to our season, we've just got a big bungle.
Keays could be the goal of his life. Opens it up, bangs it a goal. He's got it. One for the ages. No, it's touched the post. They're celebrating. They don't know. They don't know yet.
As we're all probably very well aware of now, Ben Keays takes a shot at goal with 78 seconds left in the game, and it does look like it goes through for a goal. Watching it live, I totally saw this going through for a goal, and I was absolutely pumped, being a Crow supporter myself, and I didn't realise until it was too late that the umpire actually said it hit the post. So this video is going to take a little look into the incident a little bit further and see what we can do, what the AFL can do better next time. Now, before we get too far into the video, please do remind yourselves that I am a Crow supporter, so I might be a little bit biased here. Take everything I say with a grain of salt.
Absolutely, the Crows were robbed. Right in front of me. Right in front of me.
All jokes aside, on the national broadcast, Channel 7 and KO, the Fox stream, you can actually see and hear the commentators say that they think it's hit the back of the goalpost, more specifically the goalpost padding. Now, I've sort of zoomed in a little bit here on what the ARC has provided, and these are apparently supposed to be linked up, so every frame that you see skip one frame forward. What it's showing on the top is at the exact same time as what's showing down the bottom. So the point in time where you can see the ball that it kind of almost looks like it would hit the back of the goalpost, the padding, you can see that the ball is a clear metre behind the actual goal line itself. Unfortunately, the goal umpire himself didn't seem to see the need to refer this to the ARC. There's been several times this year where you'll see something that's clearly been touched or clearly a goal get reviewed. At this point in time when there's only a minute left and it is just a 2-point game, why was this not referred is absolutely beyond me. I have no idea why this wasn't referred, and I guess the way the rules currently are, the field umpires cannot overturn this and say maybe we should go and have a look at this, because surely one of the 4 field umpires thought that was a goal and thought that in this crucial part of the game that it should be reviewed a little bit further. So I think ultimately we can put this down to human error. The goal umpire did make a mistake, and I guess we won't truly know what his reasoning was unless he comes out and speaks about it. But putting it down to human error, I think that is totally fine. I think the thing that's extremely frustrating for me as a Crows fan, other Crows fans and AFL fans is that there's no recourse for the Adelaide Crows. I think the field umpires should have a way to be able to pause the game, hold the game and say, that doesn't seem right, let's take a look at it, because it can change the outcome of the game. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it does affect the Crows' chance at finals. If this was allowed a goal and this was the final score in the game, the Crows would have won. And then they play West Coast Eagles next week, which you can't always assume, but you would hope that the Crows would win that game. And if they did, they would most likely make finals. There has to be another way that the club and the umpires who are not the goal umpire are able to challenge this decision mid-game to ensure that the right outcome is achieved. So the next question we can ask ourselves is, how do other sports deal with situations like this, and do they always get it right? I think a pretty good example is the Hawkeye that's used in tennis. Apparently it's within 5mm correct, and their actual variance, their standard deviation, is actually less than that. The 5mm is what's allowed, and I think they said they were 3.6 or something like that. So Hawkeye is extremely accurate. It was actually originally used for cricket, but you can see it be used in the Australian Open, and it does seem pretty good. The broadcast cameras probably let it down because a lot of the balls do seem to be in, but when they use the Hawkeye, you can see that they're out. But I think that's just a stream quality issue. Another example that could be used is the VAR in soccer, especially over in the EPL. You can see a goal here was allowed for Ronaldo. Watching it on the camera, you can actually see that the ball does cross the goal line, but I think it's important to check through VAR that it does go through for a goal. I think something like this would be very good. Currently, the equipment that the AFL use is definitely subpar. I don't even know if they're achieving 30 frames a second. From the previous clip, you'd be able to see that the ball moves from one section to the next quite far because it's only one frame. I think they're using 30 frames a second, which is just not enough for elite sports. If they could use 120 or even 60 frames a second, I'm sure that would help, that you could actually see a few more frames to actually determine if a ball has been touched or gone through. And overall, the quality of the cameras is extremely poor to me. It might be a streaming issue again, but you see when a replay is done and the arcs zoom in to whether the ball's been touched, It just seems recently a lot of the times they're too nervous to make the call and they always just say umpire's decision. But I think they would be able to override that if they had better quality cameras that were clearer and had a higher frame rate. Between that and advanced technology like VAR or Hawkeye, I think the AFL could improve to make these decisions and make them correctly. So now we'll take a quick listen to what Matthew Nicks, the Adelaide Crows coach, has to say on what's just happened. Of course, he can't really say anything that criticises the umpire or the goal umpire himself without receiving a fine, so he sort of just says a whole lot of nothing. To be fair, this wasn't the final thing that actually lost the Crows the game. They kicked 4 goals 8 in the last quarter. If one of those 8 behinds were a goal, they would have won. So it's not specifically this one last goal that cost them the game. Yet again, 2 weeks in a row, inaccurate kicking has cost the Crows the game. Let's take a listen to what Matty Nicks has to say.
Cut to the chase, Matthew. Were you denied a goal that would have won you the game?
From where I'm on the bench now, from where I can't tell you whether it was a goal or not. What I can tell you, my understanding is that we review those moments, especially at the end of games.
That's Matty Nicks asking in the probably the most politically correct way without receiving a fine, asking why was this not reviewed without criticising the actual umpire himself. And this was later clarified the next day on Sunday, which we will get to in just a minute. The Fox Footy Super Saturday team also had some questions about why this was not reviewed. Take a listen.
I don't think there was a score review all night for the whole game, which is interesting.
There wasn't.
Because we usually get a score review somewhere along the game. But with that tight, being that tight of a moment and being that tight to the goalpost, I mean, we've seen for the last 5 or 6 years, everything they just go, they go upstairs.
This is their worst.
It was a big talking topic this week, obviously, and even on the Sunday Footy Show on Channel 9, you can hear Matthew Lloyd ask as well, just pretty much every commentator asking why was this not done. I do feel sorry for the goal umpire. He's going to be getting a lot of questions, and in the end he did get stood down for the rest of the year. But you just have to ask yourself why. Like Matty Lloyd says, everything goes upstairs, everything gets checked, so why was this one not? It's just very confusing.
But last night, I must admit, I've got no affection for the Crows or anything, but it leaves a real sour taste in your mouth, to be honest. It's as big a mistake as I can remember. You can understand the heat of the moment of field umpire making a mistake, but in this situation, when you have, can go upstairs, and they do go upstairs sometimes for things you wish they didn't. For less. And in this situation, he had players all around him. Why he just didn't go upstairs? And
coming into the last 2 weeks of the year, this has a massive effect on the final ladder position for multiple teams. Obviously, the Crows are now, their season is over. They still had their chance if they beat Sydney and then beat West Coast, as we know. Geelong lost against St Kilda, so they are out as well. St Kilda's spot is not locked in, and the Giants spot is also not locked in because now Sydney Swans can threaten them, and I think a few teams underneath them can also threaten them as well. So this ultimately has a massive effect on the overall ladder, and it's not just the outcome of one game. Not trying to make this thing bigger than Ben-Hur, but it does affect other teams, not just the Crows. Through the AFL media and also on the website, Gillon McLachlan has actually stated that the Adelaide 1-point loss to Sydney was a mistake and would have been overturned if it was actually reviewed. And that's in his opinion. And as he also states that the result will stand, so there's nothing they can do, which I think is, ultimately it is fair. You can't change the outcome of the game because if they did class that as a goal, there's no way of knowing if Sydney got the clearance and then kicked it down into their forward 50 and then they could have kicked a goal and then won the game anyway. The only way this would ever be able to be reversed is if it was a kick after the siren, like Siren Gate, but this wasn't that situation, so Crows just have to take the loss. So the next question is, where do we go from here? What has to change in the AFL to make sure that this does not happen again? I know the AFL are not listening, but maybe you guys are. So here are some suggestions that I have that I think the AFL should introduce next year. And let's see if we do see something like this in the next year in the AFL, or possibly even a few years down the track. So some of my suggestions you can see on the screen. I think number one has to be done next year because the cameras are just totally terrible. The frame rate sucks. The quality sucks. They need to get way better cameras. They're a multi-billion-dollar company. They've got no excuse as to why the cameras are this bad. This should fix a lot of the umpire's call because, usually the quality of the camera is that bad that you can't actually see if the ball's being touched or kicked or whatever. So it always reverts back to the umpire's soft call, which I think is just a cheap cop-out. Why spend all this money on camera gear if you can't get it to work? Number 2, I think they should introduce something like the Coach's Challenge, very similar to the NRL, which is the Captain's Challenge, where one time in a game you can actually challenge the call only on a goal, on a touch or whatever, that they have the camera where they can use the cameras to get a better understanding of what's happened and possibly change the call. If you get it wrong and the call is not overturned, you lose your challenge. But if you get it right, you retain your challenge, very similar to the NRL. I think that works fairly well. I think the goal umpires and the field umpires still need better training. We see that a lot where the goal umpires will rely on the arc to get the right call when it's clearly been a goal or it's clearly been touched. Sometimes the ball has been kicked and they're not sure if it's been touched behind the line, and you look at the replay and it's called almost immediately that it's a goal because the ball is well over a metre behind the goal line. I think the umpires are probably just need a little bit better training there. And the last one I think that they should do is advanced AI. So that I mean Hawkeye, VAR, something I think the AFL should start looking into this a little bit more and developing their own version, or being able to get a version of VAR but reliant, more relevant to the AFL. They've got all this money, they really need to start investing in this technology because, as we know, it costs the Crows the game and pretty much their season. It's affected other teams. There's some suggestions. If you can think of any other suggestions, or if you like my suggestions, please do leave a like and comment below which one you like. And thanks for watching.